Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Illinois Market Development Meeting. I'm honored to have two ladies here with the Illinois Shines program. So this program has a lot of potential, and I know we're all eager to learn more about the Illinois Shines program. Before we get started, I want to give a special thanks to Ola and Julie. They've been generous and gracious enough to agree to be the guest speakers and do a presentation for you all. I had the pleasure of meeting them at the event in Chicago and was blown away with the presentation that they was giving on the Illinois Shines program. And I'll let them go into a little bit about their background. So again, let's give a warm welcome to Julie and Ola in the chat.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Eric, for having us. My name is Ola Tomaszewski. I am the Illinois Shines Outreach Coordinator, working with the Program Administrator, and I'm here today with Julie Hurwitz. Julie, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Ola. Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Hurwitz. I'm the Distributed Generation Sector Strategist for the Illinois Shines program. And what that means is I work as the main point of contact for distributed generation participants in the Illinois Shines program. And happy to be here today.
Okay, great, thank you. So here's our agenda for today. We'll just be going over, a general overview of the program, moving into program block categories, types of program participants, designee registration, and ongoing program requirements, the project application timeline, program support, and as Eric mentioned, we'll have some time for some questions afterwards. Okay. So first, the Illinois Shines program is a state-administered incentive program that supports the development of solar energy generation in Illinois. The program was originally created under the Future Energy Jobs Act and was expanded under the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act in 2020.
Yeah, I was just going to say the microphone is a little fuzzy. Maybe, do you want to try going off camera? Maybe that'll help.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that helped immediately.
Can you hear me a little better now?
Better. Yep.
Better? Okay, let me know if I keep cutting out. I have been having issues the past couple of weeks. Okay, well, sorry everybody. So Illinois utilities are required to show that a certain portion of their energy is generated by renewable sources. So where the Illinois Shines program comes in is it incentivizes approved vendors to develop solar projects by certifying renewable energy credits and assigning them a monetary value for the electricity produced by these solar projects. So the RECs that are created by the projects are then purchased from the approved vendors by Illinois utilities, and approved vendors are able to pass along the value of these payments to the customer in the form of reduced purchase prices, installation costs, lease payments, etc. So I put here on the bottom for reference, one REC is equal to 1 megawatt hour of energy produced. And kind of at its core, the Illinois Shines program is based on the purchase and retirement of these RECs. So the program is helping the state reach its target of being 100% renewable energy generated by 2050. So here's just a little chart about the breakdown between REC buyers, which are our utilities, sellers, which would be the approved vendors, and end-use customers. So each year, the IPA sets REC prices for each program category. So approved vendors are able to estimate how many RECs a project can produce and then kind of cross-reference the value of the REC price for that project. This information is then disclosed to the customer, and customers are allowed to shop around and kind of compare different offers from different approved vendors in the program. For distributed generation projects, depending on who's the owner of the project, customers can transfer the RECs produced to the approved vendors, and they can receive reduced equipment, installation, and other energy costs. And for community solar projects, customers subscribe to solar projects and they're able to earn energy bill credits from the approved vendor, who are again paid by the utilities for the RECs generated by that project. Okay, and just a little more of an overview. So there are 6 total program block categories. First, we have small distributed generation, which I think is probably most relevant to everybody here. So this is typically like what we think of when we think of solar. So these are projects up to and including 25 kilowatts in size, typically like for homeowners, small businesses. The energy that's generated for these projects kind of are used on site. Next, we have large distributed generation. So these are projects greater than 25 kilowatts, so and up to 5 megawatts in size. So these are going to be larger projects like warehouses, farms, utility scale power producers, and things like that. Next, we have traditional community solar. So these are projects up to 5 megawatt size. And these target individuals who are unable to host a project on their own property. So anybody who's renting, this is a really great opportunity for them to kind of take advantage of solar energy. Community-driven community solar, very similar to traditional community solar. There's just additional criteria. So the development of the project has to be driven by the members of the community that the project will serve. Next, we have the equity eligible contractor category. So this category is only for equity eligible contractor approved vendors certified by the program administrator. And lastly, the public schools category. So these are any types of solar projects, but they have to serve a public school in Illinois. Okay. So there are 3 main types of program participants. I've talked a little bit about approved vendors. So approved vendors are entities approved by the program administrator, and approved vendors actually are the ones who submit projects to the program, and they act as the contractual counterparty with the utilities. So typically, like approved vendors will be the developers, installers, they could be an SREC broker or aggregator. And approved vendors work with designees to manage various portions of solar system development. So designees are any third-party entities that have direct interaction with end-use customers. So these can be installers, marketing firms, community solar subscriber agents, lead generators, and sales organizations. And lastly, we have equity eligible contractors. So an equity eligible contractor can either be an approved vendor or designee. The distinction here is that an equity eligible contractor has to be majority owned by an equity eligible person. Okay, and just to touch on kind of a little bit more information on designee registration and ongoing program requirements. There are really 4 main types of designees in the program. So first, disclosure form designees. So they actually create the disclosure forms on behalf of the approved vendor. Next, we have community solar subscriber agent designees. So they manage the community solar subscription information on behalf of the approved vendor. Marketing or sales designees. So they can act on behalf of the approved vendor or designee, and these can be like customer acquisition agents, lead generators, door-to-door marketing, salesmen, things like that. And the last designation is installer designees. So they'll install systems on behalf of the approved vendor or designee. I just added here, so designees of designees are called nested designees. So they can only be marketing or sales designees or installer designees, since only approved vendors can actually permit disclosure form designees and community solar subscriber agent designees to kind of work directly beneath their approved vendor account. And some ongoing requirements here for designees. So designees are required to renew their status annually. They're required to submit an MES compliance plan, a mid-year report, and an end-of-year report. Okay, and I'll pass along to Julie to kind of go into the project application process here.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Ola. So yeah, like Ola mentioned, I'm going to walk through the typical project process and the timeline because there are quite a few steps in the project application process. As you can see on the screen, there's roughly 9 benchmarks throughout the Illinois Shines project application process. Steps 1 and 2 are typically where the designee would have the most involvement because they're typically working with the customer to execute the installation contract and educating the customers on the benefit of solar and the benefits of the Illinois Shines program. So as a designee, you might not be involved in all of these steps in the application timeline, but it's still super helpful to have an understanding of the timeline so that you're able to communicate that to your customers and keep them informed about what to expect throughout the process. So the very first step in the process is the customer disclosure form. And that's completed in the Illinois Shines portal and then provided for the customer to sign either e-sign or in-person wet signature. And this quite literally discloses information about the project to the customer, the installation expectations, pricing, and the benefits of participating in Illinois Shines. So this does need to be completed before the customer contract. And that's a very critical requirement of the Illinois Shines program, is that the disclosure form is signed by the customer before they sign the installation contract. So next in the process would be working with the customer to get the installation contract signed, and the information in the customer contract needs to be consistent with what was provided in the disclosure form. So steps 1 and 2, timing wise, are pretty dependent on how fast the customer is moving through the process, and the sales structure isn't really impacted by the Illinois Shines team. The next step in the process is submitting the Part 1 application. So that's done by the approved vendor and it's submitted on the Illinois Shines portal. And what the approved vendor is going to be submitting is system design, size specs, site control requirements, expected REC payment calculations. So all of those details about the project really need to be determined by the time the Part 1 application is submitted to the program. A completed disclosure form is required to even start the Part 1 application on the Illinois Shines portal. And again, everything that's submitted in the Part 1 application really needs to match what was provided to the customer in the disclosure form. Once that is submitted to on the Illinois Shines portal, that's when the program administrator would review the application and approve it. So that can take roughly 2 to 6 weeks. We aim for a turnaround time on 2 weeks for the Part 1 application approval, but there can be some back and forth between the approved vendor and the program admin if there are questions on the application or there's information missing. So that can move it up for more than 2 weeks. And then if there is an influx in applications, which can sometimes happen at the beginning of a program year, sometimes it takes longer than 2 weeks for turnaround time on Part 1 application approval. After the Part 1 application is approved by the program admin, then the project would go in front of the ICC for ICC approval. It's more of a formality because the project has already been verified by the program admin, but this part still can take 2 to 3 weeks since the ICC only meets every 2 to 3 weeks. So it's really dependent on their meeting schedule and when the ICC can approve those projects. After the ICC approval process, That's when the rec contract is provided to the approved vendor. So that's the binding contract between the approved vendor and the utility ComEd, Ameren, whichever utility is entering into the rec contract with the approved vendor. Approved vendors have 7 business days to execute the rec contract and 30 business days to put down the 5% collateral that's required with any Illinois Shines rec contract. So that puts us at about 1 to 4 weeks for the rec contract stage of the timeline, depending on how quickly the approved vendor is moving on that. After the rec contract is executed, that's typically where we see the project is installed and energized. We have 0 to 18 months in there because the project can already be installed and energized before this entire process even starts. Usually it's between the part 1 and the part 2 application that the system is being installed and energized. And we do allow a development timeline of up to 18 months. Again, it depends what type of project you're looking at. If it's a small residential project, it's not going to require 18 months to develop and energize it. If it's a large commercial project, it might take closer to 18 months. After the project is installed and energized, that's when the approved vendor would need to register the project in either GATS or MRETS with what we call an irrevocable standing order. And this is how the RECs actually get transferred to the utilities, and they track the transfer of the RECs. That happens anytime after energization and is done by the approved vendor. After all of those steps and the project has been installed and energized and that irrevocable standing order has been created, that's when the Part 2 application would be submitted by the approved vendor. The Part 2 application is essentially verifying that nothing has changed from what was submitted in the Part 1 application. The Part 2 application, again, that process can take 2 to 6 weeks, depending on our application review turnaround time and if there's any back and forth required between the approved vendor and the program admin as they're reviewing and approving that application. After the Part 2 application is approved, then we are at the last step in the process, and that's the payments issued to the vendor. And there are some ongoing requirements required to maintain the rec contract. The approved vendor can start invoicing for the rec payments the month following the Part 2 verification. So if a application is Part 2 verified in February, the approved vendor would be able to start invoicing for it in March. When it comes to invoicing for rec payments, small DG, which is going to be, like Ola said, anything less than 25 kilowatts, that's receiving 100% of the rec payments up front. It's all based on what the system is expected to produce. And then for large DG, which is anything over 25 kilowatts up to 5 megawatts, that's going to be receiving rec payments 15% upfront. So the first invoice would be 15% of the total rec payments, and then the remainder would be quarterly over 6 years. So that's a difference in the invoicing schedule for smaller and larger projects. Okay, so we walked through all 9 significant benchmarks in the Illinois Shines project application process. There'll be time for questions at the end, and I think I saw a few in the chat popping up as I was walking through that. But for now, I think we can just move on to the next slide, which is a little ongoing program support that we offer. And yeah, and I know someone asked in the chat if we would be sharing these slides afterwards. definitely will share these slides, and you'll have access to all of the links on this program support slide. So a few resources here. The first is a link to become an AV or designee if you are not already. The second is vendor FAQs, which can be super helpful. We also have consumer FAQs, which can be helpful to provide to customers. The third here is the program guidebook. If you haven't viewed that, we update that annually, and that really has all the nuts and bolts of how to participate in Illinois Shines, either as an approved vendor or designee. The fourth thing here is a guide to going solar, and we'll share that as well. This is a super helpful resource. It's a customer-facing resource that basically walks through that timeline on the previous slide, but from the customer's point of view. So what they can expect in terms of the timeline and the steps in the process. And then we have a rec prices spreadsheet. Those are the current rec prices for the 2023-24 program year, but those are also updated annually. And then a rec payments calculator where you can determine what the expected rec payout would be over a 15 or 20-year rec contract. We also have ongoing support. We have an email hotline and a phone hotline that you can always contact with questions. And then we have a consumer protection team, which works directly with consumers and investigates consumer complaints and other potential program violations and enforces program requirements. And we do have a consumer protection handbook, which is a very critical resource for approved vendors and designees in understanding how to communicate with customers about Illinois Shines and the do's and don'ts around communicating with customers. So yeah, we walked through the program, the application timeline, and some of these resources. I think we can move on and open it up to questions at this point. And I know we had a couple going in the chat.
We got one. Can you explain the 5% collateral process?
Yes. So every Illinois Shines program project requires a 5% collateral to be put down at the time that the rec contract is executed. So that's 5% of the total rec value incentive, and that's facilitated between the approved vendor and the utility. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yep. So Lucas, you can come off of mute.
Yes. I had a couple of questions. One, what expectation would you set, like 18 months or 24 months for a customer purchasing a system to receive their rec payment? And the next question is about batteries. So if the system doesn't produce the way it's supposed to within the 15-year period, I think that's what the 10% deposit's for. Now, obviously, the net meter is not going to record kilowatt hour production the way it would without batteries. So is that a combination of the monitoring system tracking what it's actually producing, or is that already determined?
Okay, so to answer the first question, it's difficult to give like a set timeline for what like a set 18-month or 24-month from start to finish timeline for customers. That's kind of why we were walking through the steps, and I was giving a range for each part of the application process. So my recommendation would just be to, look at the steps in the process. Some could take 2 to 6 weeks, some can take 1 to 4 weeks, and kind of gauge from there how long the process would be. And then for your second question, is the question, what happens if the system doesn't produce what it was expected to produce.
Yes, so we know the system is, hypothetically, it's going to produce the same as it would without a battery. My question is that the way you record that is what it's putting on the grid, right? So do we have a plan on how to account for what isn't going on the grid because it's getting stored in the battery first?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So there are guidelines in the program guidebook on how the battery needs to be metered in order to not have that issue. I'll be honest, I'm not an expert on that topic, but there are specific guidelines regarding that in the guidebook. And I think Ola and I would both be happy to get more information on that specific question and follow up with Eric to provide it for the group.
Awesome. I had one more and then got a phone call and forgot. So if somebody else has one, that'd be great.
No problem. Go ahead, Sam.
Hey there, so I had a question about if the homeowner moves while they're waiting for their check, will they still be able to get their check sent to their new address? And also for the new homeowner, if they purchase a home that is in the middle of an Illinois Shines SREC deal and they don't produce enough energy, are they liable for having to pay some of that money back?
Yeah, good questions. So for the first one, the incentive payments are between the approved vendor and the utility. So the checks aren't going directly to, or the checks from the utility and the Illinois Shines program aren't going directly to the customer's home or directly to the customer. That's all facilitated towards the approved vendor. So that would need to be told to the approved vendor that you are working with, that the customer moved and the checks need to go to a different place. And then on the second question, that's something that would need to be worked out in the installation contract. Or sorry, was your second question about the new homeowner or the initial homeowner?
Yeah, the new homeowner, my understanding is that you're getting your rebate check and it represents 15 years of credits that you're promising to produce. And if they change their consumption habits so they're not producing those SRECs, who would be liable to have to pay that money? I guess it'd be the approved vendor, right? Have to take care of that.
Is the possibility that there would be a drawdown on that 5% collateral. So that's kind of the safe hold there. In terms of customers moving, it is a requirement that the installation contract includes language about what happens if the customer does move.
Yeah, I can jump into that real quick. So in the disclosure form, we actually put in the disclosure form stating that if you're moving, then you're going to have to contact Carbon Solutions to make that transition, that switch from that new homeowner to that current homeowner. So that language is actually in the disclosure form prior to signing that power contract.
Okay, got it.
All right.
What blocks have run out completely, and we're hearing like June is going to be a re-up in the blocks?
Yeah, so I think all but in terms of distributed generation, all but large DG Group B have run out of capacity at this point. And yeah, like you mentioned, June 1st, 2024 is when new blocks will be opening.
So should people be kind of getting in line for when that opens by doing systems now and getting all the paperwork in order?
Yeah, definitely, because we do have a wait list. So systems can get onto the wait list as soon as they're ready. And I do recommend that when the new program year reopens on June 1st, applications are going to be reviewed on a first come, first served basis. So if they're on the wait list, they'll be reviewed before an application.
Today, but I noticed on the site updated this month that January of next year, ComEd Ameren are changing to where delivery charges will not be offset by solar. Can you just verbally confirm that?
You want me to confirm that the offset?
No, one of the guests.
Oh, they're not with the utility company.
Yeah, I know it's kind of nice, but on the Illinois Shines website is what I'm referring to under the fact.
I see your FAQ. Yep.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, there was some information going around about Ameren and ComEd, actually ComEd announcing that they were no longer going to compensate for the delivery charges after January, and I just happened to see it this weekend on your website under the facts, and so I just wanted any more information you have about that to be vocalized if possible.
Got it. Okay. I actually don't have any more information about that. Ola, do you have
I
any
do
information
not either. Yeah, I don't have any additional information, but I can research and get back to you, Lucas.
Thank you so much.
And I'll send you both what Lucas has sent me. It's from the FAQ page from the Illinois Shines website.
What's it say? What's it say in there?
It said what Lucas said.
Okay. Gotcha.
All right. Let me see here. All right. So he put it in the chat here. Thought I saw another question in the chat. Where was it? Dr. Josh, is there a date for when the next batch of SROCs for those that are currently out for refill? Okay, yeah, so that's June 1st.
Yeah, I covered that. Yep.
Let's see. Sadie said, aren't SRACs calculated based on the total production number, and those is tracked through the system monitoring link to the inverter?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And is it not a guarantee that the customer will get the SRAC? Is that what you're asking? Okay. So are you asking that question pertaining, since we're on the waiting list, that is not guaranteed that the customer? Okay. So to I guess reshape the question. So if someone is on the waiting list, and then let's say the new block January 1st is taken up again, what happens to those customers that was on the waiting list that can't get the new block that's currently?
Ola, do you want to take that question? Or so they won't get the current program year's rec prices. In terms of if the customers are guaranteed, right now the wait lists aren't close to what would be considered full. We also do not have a determination on what the capacity in those blocks will look like for the next program year. So can't really speak to what full would even look like for those wait lists. And not to mention that any unallocated capacity from this program year from some of the other categories, like public schools, relatively unused category. So there's a lot of capacity that'll be reallocated to customers on those wait lists. All of these factors lead me to say there's a very, very high chance that customers will be getting it, but nothing in this world is guaranteed. And not until we know what the capacity will look like for the next program year can we like really answer those questions for sure.
So would it be safe to say that if say for instance, we sign up our customer for they at a $81 rate, and then they get on a waiting list, and let's just say that whole block that they were supposed to get on, but again, it's first come, first serve, and it goes to that next block, and then the rate change that is not necessarily a guarantee that they will get it at that particular rate, but there's still possible that they will get a SREC
Mm-hmm.
incentive, but it might be
Yeah.
at a different rate.
Yeah. And I just remembered we actually published some language on the program website, which I'll drop in the chat in a second. How to message that to your customers, how to communicate the waitlist situation, and how
No other questions from anyone? Nope. Going once. Going twice.
Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And I just dropped that link in the chat to some helpful messaging around the waitlist procedure and communications to customers.
And we'll be sending over the slides, Eric, to you, and maybe you could distribute those to everybody here today.
Yeah, I'll either send it in an email or go to our private Facebook group and then publish those slides in there. So everyone look for that post, and that's where those slides would be. It'd be a lot easier just to post it there, other than sending it to everybody individual. But again, thank you both for being here and was able to give a presentation. Felt like it's better to hear from the source than for them to continue to hear from my mouth saying over and over again and just reading off the website or giving Ola a call and bothering her. so I appreciate you guys coming and just dropping off the knowledge to everyone. I will send out. Did you need me to send out the questions to you, or you already have those written down?
If you could send Eric maybe a summary of the questions. I did get most of them, but I want to make sure I didn't miss any. I think just the two, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was just mainly the battery. Battery was the big one. I believe you answered majority of it.
Yeah.
Okay, that'll work. And then when they provide me the answer, I'll just post it in our Facebook group, and or I'll publish it in the next market development meeting. Alrighty. Well, that concludes our